Stock marketeers see Brexit as a reason for the misery that many companies are thinking about moving to Wall Street. The Arab oil company ADNOC's considerations about buying its British rival BP highlight the weaknesses of London's financial centre. The valuations, which are low compared to international standards, make even the largest British companies takeover targets. And therefore, more and more companies want to withdraw from the local stock exchange or are avoiding the London Stock Exchange, the LSE. One of the most prominent companies that recently gave the more than 300-year-old trading center the cold shoulder is ARM. Because of easier access to fresh capital, the chip designer based in Cambridge in the UK chose the US technology exchange Nasdaq for his acclaimed stock market comeback in September 23. Thanks to the boom in artificial intelligence, the sharp price has almost tripled since then. And the high-performance processors required for computationally intensive AI programs are based almost exclusively on ARM technology. The London stock market is for sale, says Charles Hall, the chief analyst at brokerage firm Peel Hunt. When valuations are low, it's absolutely inevitable that foreign investors will take a sharp approach, he says. And one reason for the below-average price performance is the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union. That was explained by Emmanuel Zhao, chief investment strategist for Europe at Barclays Bank. And Brexit brought stagnation to the country and one of the highest capital outflows in the world. The London Selection Index FTSE is currently trading at almost 8,000 points, and that's within striking distance of its record high from February 23. However, the ratio of prices to earnings per share of the 100 companies listed there is at 11.22. That's just under half as high as in the US leading index S&P 500. And this is the largest gap since at least 1990. The German DAX has price-earnings ratio of a good 15 as even. It's only a matter of time before someone comes after BP, for example, says analyst Dan Coatsworth from online broker AJ Bell. And one British company after another is being taken over by foreign competitors or financial investors. They see the opportunity and they know that a takeover will either strengthen their market position or give them a tidy profit over time. For this reason, the gaming provider Flutter and the construction industry supplier CRH announced their move from London to the New York Stock Exchange last year. BP's arch-rival Shell is considering such a step because European oil companies in particular have been lagging behind US companies such as Exxon and Chevron in terms of valuation for years. It will make us poorer for decades if companies like BP and Shell leave, is a warning from Peel Hunt expert Hall, because it means a huge transfer of capital. This is already happening on a smaller scale throughout the UK stock exchange, he says. The FTSE Small Cap Index could face its end as early as 2028 if British companies were taken over at a sustained pace or didn't even seek a listing in London. And according to the information, around 1,000 companies from 100 countries are listed on the LSE's main market. The total capitalization amounts to the equivalent of €4.4 trillion. In the prime standard selection segment of the Deutsche Börse, there are almost 300 companies with a total market value of around €2.2 trillion. But that was one bad news, but I can't leave out another topic this week as well. I have to talk about this, even if it doesn't have to do with Brexit. Because Rishi Sunak seems to want nothing more than to transport the first and even a tiny group of refugees to Rwanda. And London has been preparing to deport unwanted asylum seekers to the East African country for 2 years now, and so far not a single flight has been taking off to Kigali. And time is of the essence. Sunak has promised his voters that he will threaten Rwanda to stop all the small boats crossing the English Channel without permission and to keep illegal migrants away from the nation. But it has remained an empty promise so far, and according to recent polls, doubts about the success of Sunak's Rwanda plan are even growing. Last weekend alone, almost 750 people crossed the channel in boats, and calculated over the course of a year, there could be 55,000 new arrivals. not less than last year, but significantly more. The British Conservatives had so much to hope for from their Rwanda plans. The ideas seemed more radical than anything you can find on the continent. Anyone who crossed the channel without permission was automatically illegal and had no right to even apply for asylum. The migrants should kindly submit their application in Rwanda, where they would be transported by kind of post from England. A return from there to Great Britain was out of the question. And the British government offered the Rwandan government hundreds of millions of pounds so that it would no longer have to deal with a vexing issue. First Boris Johnson and then Rishi Sunak viewed this British solution to the migration problem as an election hit. However, angry protests accompanied the Tory plans from the start. And just as the first plane to Rwanda was about to be loaded with asylum seekers in June 22, the European Court of Human Rights stopped the action with an interim injunction. In November 23, Great Britain's Supreme Court declared this policy unlawful because the judge's opinion was that Rwanda did not offer refugees the necessary security. Sunak and his ministers reacted to this verdict both promptly and indignantly. In December, they introduced a new Rwanda Security Act in the lower house, the task of which was to override the court ruling by parliamentary resolution. The new law simply determined that Rwanda was safe, no matter what the courts believed, and that the planned mass deportation could go ahead, regardless of any legal objections. After the judges, the lords and ladies of the House of Lords, the members of Westminster's diverse second chamber, also protested against the plan. When discussing new legislative proposals, they have a certain right of review which can delay the decision-making process and sometimes lead to changes. Many of these lords who found the plan deeply immoral have come forward in recent weeks with proposals for radical changes. They tried in various ways to undermine the government's claim that Rwanda was a safe country and that objection was impossible. The fact that the government even wanted to deport people to Rwanda who had fought alongside the British in Afghanistan or had supported them in some way, for example, that provoked particularly sharp criticism in the House of Lords. But time and time again, the Tory majority in the House of Commons rejected the House of Lords' requests for changes. And this week, the parliamentary ping-pong game between the two chambers was entering its final rounds. In the end, there can only be one winner. At some point, the upper house will have to admit defeat if it does not want to endanger its own legitimacy. Ultimately, the decision rests with the elected chamber, and that means the lower house. Prime Minister Sunak believes that he will finally be able to present a finally passed Rwanda law to King Charles for signature within a few days. This would clear the way for mass deportation. And there are still some obstacles that remain to be overcome before deportations become possible at all. The government has not yet been able to find an airline that would be willing to transport the refugees intended for deportation to Rwanda. Neither the mainstream airlines nor the state-owned Rwandan airline Rwandair want to be associated with Sunak's Rwanda project because they fear it would not help their reputation. And meanwhile, the Rwandan government itself has made it clear that it expects a slow ramp-up time and that it would not be prepared to accept more than 500 asylum seekers in the first year. In London, there was always talk of tens of thousands who could be deported in this way. 500. But the biggest problem could still lie ahead for Sunak. Refugee organizations and lawyers are already preparing applications for a new interim injunction at the European Court of Human Rights. If this court gets them into trouble again in the next few weeks, the Tory right wing is already demanding Britain's immediate withdrawal from the European Convention on Human Rights, although they insisted that it comes to existence in the first place. Moderate Tories, right up to the highest cabinet ranks, have left no doubt that they would not play along with such an exit, by the way. But if you really want to know about the European Convention on Human Rights, which has nothing to do with the EU, by the way, yeah, those are two separate things. There is a brilliant YouTube video with Sir Patrick Stewart that explains it so brilliantly. If you've never seen that, you have to see that. And if you want to know a bit more from my channel, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.